Hey James, I found Ask Mr. Greenthumb gardening group. Is that it? Yeah, the one on Facebook that I'm seeing is Ask Mr. Greenthumb gardening group. I don't have anything live now. All right, I think I found him. So once we get going, I'll listen in. You guys all set in there? All right, here we go.
For everything from questions about cucumbers to homes on cul-de-sacs, you've come to the right place. Welcome to the Ask Mr. Greenthumb in Real Estate Show with Stan DeFreitas, the dad, and James DeFreitas, the son. For the next hour, call in with your questions about gardening, growing your favorite veggies, and growing your profits in real estate. Call them anytime at 727-254-7127. That's 727-254-7127. And now, your hosts, Stan and James DeFreitas.
And a big good morning or evening to you, depending on when you're hearing this show. Live right now.
That's right.
So we appreciate you. I am Stan the dad, and you are James the son.
And I am James the son. I'm James DeFreitas, and we always appreciate people that take the time to listen to us. If you're hearing us on Sunday mornings from 8 to 9, or if you're listening from 8 p.m. to 9 p.m. on Saturday evenings, we certainly appreciate people setting the dials to do that. And of course, if you're on Facebook Live, about every 3 weeks, we're, posting 2-hour shows back to back. So, and then on YouTube Live, we have that going as well. So if people want to watch us, they can. Usually the first 5 minutes or so is, if we're being honest, is just making sure that everything is working correctly. But needless to say, we think it is. And if not, Brian was going to check on it for us and verify that sound is actually going through to both devices on both of the social media channels that we're out on right now.
Brian's the man behind the curtain, making things happen, kind of like the Wizard of Oz.
Yes, he is our producer. So, we appreciate Brian as always. And it's so right now, what's going on in the gardening space? I mean, now that we're in the full tilt of summer, and we have, because this show is obviously, going to in August, in mid to late August. So when people growing,
Different things. One would be this avocado that I'm growing. It's on a tree. It's called a Brogden. And it was found in a grove called the Brogden Grove. And
okay. I wondered why it was called that. And one of the things I noticed about this avocado, most of the time, they start out, and because you do have this avocado tree growing in your yard, they all start out with a nice green, limey green, dark green kind of color.
Right.
And then they do this weird, funky, they look almost like they're rotted.
Oh, they're not. They turn black.
But they're not. They're not rotted. They look like they're turning like a rotten color. Almost like when a banana is like overdone, that's when these are done, right?
Yeah, these are done when they become a very pretty golden black color, and they will become, of course, soft. The nice thing about this is they think it's a natural native sport. And like so many things in the world, sometimes a variety may be hybridized. This was probably a natural God hybridization, if you will. Happened sort of on its own. They found it in the grove, and then they tasted it and said, this fruit's bigger than the winter Mexican type, and it is not as big as the big Guatemalan that looked like a football. Mm-hmm. So this is probably a cross between the two. And of course, having the dark black color was a little bit unusual too. It's kind of thin skinned, so I don't think it's one of the reasons it probably did not become a big shipper, is that when it's real thin skinned, they probably wouldn't ship as well. But in my opinion, and I'm somewhat biased, I think it has the best flavor. Mm-hmm. And I noticed in a few of the restaurants that upper end restaurants where they do the guacamole sidebar, they usually use the black ones, which were the Brogdens.
You mean at the table service?
At the table service. Why? Because they are better than, in my opinion, much better. The real big ones are real big. I don't think they have any flavor. Mm. The little small winter Mexican type are tasty, but this is kind of nice because you
Welcome back to the Ask Mr. Greenthumb in Real Estate Show. Got questions about perennial flowers? What about issues with closing on your newest property? Give them a call at 727-254-7127. That's 727-254-7127. And now your hosts, Stan and James DeFreitas.
And we might say one of the things that I find interesting is that James and I tend to sometimes go off in the periphery a little bit, but that to me is what makes the show. I mean, when I was a kid, I'd watch some of the shows that did gardening, and they were like, today we'll talk about the Phalaenopsis. And I thought, oh, Lord, it's a type of orchid, but,
Not to be confused with Phalaenopsis.
Phalaenopsis, another You can have all kinds of upsis.
Yeah.
But the thing is that we like to have fun too. And I always thought, even as a kid, if I ever do a gardening show, I don't know why I thought that.
Self-fulfilling prophecy.
If I did, I would try to make it interesting than what I saw and heard back then. Because I always thought as a kid, these people are kind of snobs that were in certain societies. Now, that's not true. Since I've become an adult, I've met many people at different societies, from, hibiscus to rose to bromeliads. I used to be involved with a lot of them. A lot of them would send me what was happening, and sometimes I'd give them a free plug.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. A lot of them haven't done that over the years, so I don't worry about them as much as I did. But one thing I thought I'd up out of the back to real estate, something I read, I was reading, and I thought would be interesting for you. So the guy says he's talk to an attorney. He says, I own a real estate brokerage that specializes in auctions and property management. Well, we don't do property management, but
well, that's somebody's really glutton for punishment if you're going to do property management.
You're doing both, yeah. I'm going to say we normally ship that off to someone else, but it's like he says, I'd like to use one trade name for the part of my brokerage that does auctions and a different trade name for the part that does property management. Can I use both trade names? I
would think you probably. Now, I'm going to answer this, and it's probably going to be wrong. But I'm going to give you what I think is the right answer, and then you can tell me what the right answer actually is. I'm going to go out on a limb here, and I'm going to say that, if the main thing in almost all real estate law is to make sure that the consumers understand who they're doing business with.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so you can have a doing business as name that is different than your actual name that you do business as. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So in other words, you can have a fictitious name that you can register that then links back to the business name that you actually are under. Okay, so that's allowed. But the public has to know how to get back to who actually is responsible for that entity.
Makes sense.
So there's that. And then the other thing I would say is, and I understand why he wants to do it that way, but I think that he's probably either going to have two different names. And I don't know how you would have it under the same umbrella.
Okay, well, the answer from the attorney is no. Under the Florida Real Estate Commission, FREC, rules, a real estate company may be registered only under one trade name, while it's possible, and there you're kind of right, to change the name if the broker prefers. But the company may only operate under one name at any given time.
Right, and it's to protect the consumer.
So you were saying as know who you're dealing with.
So that you know who you're doing business with. And that's one of the reasons why, and again, this isn't being enforced at all, okay? It's only being enforced at the brokerage level by other brokers who know, okay? And not everyone knows. I mean, lots of big brokerages, and I won't mention them by name, but they ignore it. You cannot have the word properties as part of your team name. Not allowed.
A lot of them do.
You cannot have real estate as part of your team name. Not allowed.
A lot of them do.
I know they do. The problem with that is, if you're a consumer, how would you know you were dealing with a team, and how would you know you were dealing with how would you know the difference between that and dealing with a company? It's not clear.
Right.
And so that's one of the reasons why they came up with a list a few years back saying you cannot have these names as part of your team name. Now, a lot of people have invested a lot of money in these names, in their team names. People don't even realize it. They spend all this money investing in their team name just to have the government come in and say, nope, can't say that because it's confusing to the general public. So, if you come up with, JT Properties, you can't do it. So, and I'm thinking of one in particular who will probably never see this show, but you can't do it because, you would have to comply with that. And if somebody actually made a stink over it, you'd have to change it. So
I just thought I thought apropos, since you and I are starting our own thing, or you're starting your own thing.
Yeah. Well, it's I'm starting my own brokerage, and it's going to be called Dream It Real Estate. And again, we're not going to be open for business until the first week, potentially the second week in September, because it takes a lot of time to get everything up and running.
A lot of ins and outs.
A lot of ins, a lot of outs. Well, and again, there are so many components to opening up a brokerage in a lot of them are things they're very boring tasks.
Well, kind of behind the scenes things that have to be done.
Your contracts have to be in order. You have to have contract management software in place. You have to have, everything has to be ready to go so that when the consumer reaches out to you and says, "Can you help me?" You're not saying, "Well, if I only had that done, I'd be able to help you." That's not real reassuring to a consumer. But yeah, I mean, it's, a lot of the back end stuff is done. We own the name, or I should say I own the name, Dream It Real Estate. And it's one of those scenarios where a lot of good names have been picked especially in the real estate space, because of how much competition there is. Remember, if you're born in the state of Florida, you were given a birth certificate and a real estate license.
Yeah, I think it's funny. You and me and Shane and Steph and Peg and everybody we went for like a week trying to come up with names.
Yeah, and the problem is we had lots of good ideas, but they were either picked or already chosen by somebody else. And, that represents, back to the consumer again, it gets confusing if you allow people to have similar names, which makes me think of there was a trade name lawsuit that took place, and I forget where Victoria's Secret is based out of, but the guy decides he's going to open up a brassiere shop next to Victoria's Secret, and he called it Vic's Secret. And, even though it was a gender change in terms of the name, they considered it too close, and they sued him, and then he changed it to, Vicks with a plural, instead of Vic, so he was doing all kinds of things to try to avoid it. But the problem is the judge could see through the shenanigans, and ultimately I think he had to change it to something entirely else, but not without spending lots and lots of money in order to do that. So, what's in a name? Well, what's in a name can actually cause you a lawsuit. So, and again, I don't think people like thinking of life in this way, but I think if you don't think about the legalities of everything that you do, you got to be careful, and including leaving reviews for companies online. A lot of companies will send a cease and desist letter to you because they think you're defaming them or their goods and services that they provide. And on that note, that music says we're going to go pay some bills. Do not change that dial if you're watching on Facebook Live or YouTube. We appreciate you, and we'll keep going.
Stay with us as the plant talk and real estate talk continues here on AM 860, The Answer.
Want to talk real estate? Remember, you can reach Stan at 727-423-4794 or on the web at AskMrGreenthumb.com. Welcome back to the Ask Mr. Greenthumb and Real Estate Show. Connect online at AskMrGreenthumb.com. Got questions about gardening, real estate, or both? Give them a call at 727-254-7127. That's 727-254-7127. And now your hosts, Stan and James DeFreitas.
So we are here to answer your questions, be it trees or plants or shrubs, and also real estate. Of course, everybody that has a yard has a landscape. Almost everybody that has any kind of planting probably has something in the yard that's going well or not. I just had a call from a man on the way over here today who was referred to me by our friends at Stafford Tree.
Oh, cool.
And it sounds like he's got borers in his pine. He's got little tiny holes in there, and if it looks like BB holes, you've got some borers. Now, it's a different kind of borer that gets into the oak usually, but
still a beetle.
Still a little beetle. It's the larval stage of a beetle, and we're not talking Jordan, Paul, Ringo, and the boys without Epe. Not that beetle, but we're talking about a beetle that can kill those trees. And you say, well, what does that matter? Well, when you start to have trees removed, of course, you can go see our friends at Stafford Tree. They'll help cut those trees down. If you don't take care of a pine early, it's going to die. If you have an oak, it can last sometimes a good long time with borers. I saw one the other day we actually treated, and it has some problems, but I still think the tree has a number of good years in the tree. I don't think it's, it could last another 10, 15, 20 years. Does it have some problems? Sure. Most old oaks have some problems. But now is a good time to check them. So far we have had a pretty much hurricane-free early season. Doesn't mean when are the worst hurricanes usually come? Now on.
September, October.
To the fall.
Yep.
So just because we've dodged a bullet so far, which means all of us should getting a big rebate check back on our property insurance. Oh, no, that won't happen. But what they do like to say is,
we'll check with Citizens. I'm sure it's coming.
I'm sure it's coming. They still worry about the big disaster, and which just amazes me.
Well, one of the things, and something that you got me thinking a little bit with the hurricane, and again, it's been raining at least, in Dallas County, almost every day.
Sure.
I mean, we don't seem to have any day that's dry. And what I found interesting is one of the things that Stan and I was called out for recently is we were looking at some palm trees, and we were tasked with the responsibility of trying to find a definitive diagnosis for these trees and why they were dying. And again, it's not something that we do every day, but it is something that is in our bag of toolkit. And one of the things that we typically will do is we'll take samples from the palms and we'll send it off to the PhD people over at IFAS at the University of Florida. But one of the things that I thought was interesting is the lady that responded back kept talking about drought.
Right.
And and again, maybe she was referencing back earlier in the year, but and again, Gainesville weather versus, and having lived in Gainesville, which I did for 2 years, go Gators. But then living in Pinellas County the majority of my life, I was baffled by the statement. I mean, I guess in Central Florida, you would maybe have more of a chance for a drought, but she was hitting it pretty hard.
Even South Florida. Sometimes you have more of a drought. I mean, you've got the Everglades, and you don't ever think of drought down that way.
Yeah.
But you can, and you also have a real sandy, marl soil, which is sometimes, it rains real heavy. Some areas hold water, some areas don't, and that's true for our area too. But you're bringing up the point of too much water. And basically, now here she's a doctor who deals with diseases, and her comment is she's only seen it twice where water really was a culprit. But we're seeing more and more problems. I'm seeing more fungal problems.
Yeah, her name is Dr. Harmon.
Dr. Harmon. And we also, and it bothers me when I can't look at something and be sure that's what the answer is. We thought maybe phytoplasm type disease, like the bronzing, or sometimes used to be called Texas Phoenix decline. It's amazing to me.
That's what we initially thought that was killing the trees.
That's what I thought it could be.
Yeah.
But I also mentioned it could be bud rot or butt rot.
Well, one of the things that you said at the time is you said, well, when you're taking these samples, we use a drill bit to go into them. You asked me, what type of resistance were you getting when the chuck of the drill would reach the outer bark of the palm tree? And I said, well, it felt like mush. And you said, ooh, well, that's not a good sign. If it's feeling like the drill will go all the way into the palm tree just from the pressure of the weight that you're pushing behind the drill, that's not a real good sign for it not being something in the rot family.
Yep, and that's true. I mean, think of the outer bark, if you will, not really bark, but it is an outer covering of
Well, whatever you want to call it.
Call it on a
Skin.
palm. It gets really hard, but underneath there, it's basically a grass. It's called vascular bundles, and there are a bunch of straws when you see a palm cut down. And within those straws, they've got kind of, if you will, a phloem and xylem tissue within those straws
That get plugged.
And it's not exactly like the rings which you would see in a hardwood tree, and that's different. Now you can get rot into that as well, but what we're seeing is more fungal diseases. And I know they did a special the other night, I think on the Fox affiliate on Channel 13. They were talking about Ganoderma. And the problem is, normally by the time you see big conchs on the side of a palm, it's too late. That's the last stage. That's called the fruiting body of the fungi, or fungi, or fungal, whatever you want to use as your descriptive word. But that's the last stage. So this doctor was saying if they can find it really early, even on Ganoderma, they think they're trying some different fungicides that may be able to, maybe you can drill a hole and put some type of fungicide in there as well, that may be helpful in stopping that problem. I mean, they're still more in we're mapping it and identifying it, which is sort of like diseases. Often they'll go through statistics trying to find where we're seeing it, what are we seeing, how are we seeing it, when are we seeing it. And the sooner you can get to that point, then maybe you can start developing a control for that disease.
Sure.
And in the case of what we found, the Phalaenopsis, we're going to have to spray the whole palm, drench the top and the bottom. And my always worry is there's usually somebody that's going to come out and go, well, I can do it cheaper. Now, what does that mean? Well, look at this. I have a backpack sprayer. I can get up to 4.5 feet.
Are you licensed, insured? Do you I mean, there's tons of things that I would ask anybody out there that's going to do it cheaper.
No, but I did wallboard last week.
Right. Well, you stayed in a Holiday Inn Express.
Yeah, he said. So that's my problem is that, like in your case, my case, I am a certified pest control operator. I specialize mostly in trees. I don't really lawn stuff. We've done, to me, most of the good stuff that helped in lawns is gone. Stuff had any residual. So I don't really care for that. And I have tried some organic stuff, and some of it works.
Right. And it's also a field, too, that's there are a million guys that do that.
There are in the competition. So that's one of the reasons we've kind of specialized. I specialized in, in the eminent domain field. I often work in court case work, and that I find to be rewarding. Actually, we just got a case recently with John LaRue, who's one of the better attorneys in eminent domain. And if you want to call me sometimes, I'll give you a list of some different attorneys. If you happen to get into that area, let's
You
say
mean eminent domain?
Eminent domain,
not domain name?
Yeah, not domain. I had one guy who was in one of the groups I was in, and he was like, "You're trying to sell domain names," and I said, "No, I'm not trying to sell domain names." "No, I heard you. You say you're trying to go, you're selling domain names."
I don't think he sounded quite that
Well,
smart.
he wasn't quite that smart.
Yeah.
You take it back. That's giving him a whole new level of credit. But I thought, that just amazed me that people will jump to the gun on something. Of course, I'm not with that group anymore, and just as well, I'm just as happy not being with that group, because if you don't know eminent domain from domain names,
that's not a group that you really want to be around anyway.
You got a problem.
Exactly. Well, we might mention, too, to folks out there that we are always encouraging people to increase their biophilia. And if you want to do that, you buy mom a plant, buy your significant other a plant that they can take care of. And you can do that by going to your keyboard and typing in PLANTZ.com. That's PLANTZ.com. And if you want to rent a plant, say maybe you manage a hotel, or maybe you want to have some plants delivered for your wedding or special occasion or event, go to PLANTZ.us. And make sure you tell them that James and Stan DeFreitas sent you on your way, so as to let them know how you got there. And so, again, I always, one of the things that Steve Stanford, who owns plants, is always saying is increase your biophilia. It will make you happier. Your environment will be more pleasant. And we like to always encourage that.
And maybe you want to send that potted plant to, Aunt Mary, who's in Chicago or in New York City or wherever, and you want to send her something, you don't know what to send them because you're going, I've sent them this, I've sent them that. If I send them a potted plant, they'll remember me. And, you can know that even you may be somewhere else watching us. You could pick up the phone, call plants here in Florida. They'll ship it to Chicago or New York, and you still look like the hero.
Exactly. And you're giving them something that isn't just another trinket. Gift cards are nice, and they serve a place, and people can get what they want. And so there is something to that. But I will also say, giving something like that they can take care of is also very meaningful. And, go check out one of the ones I know that Steve likes is the Ficus lorata. That seems to be one of the favorites. I don't know if that's trending.
The fiddle leaf fig.
The fiddle leaf fig. I know that when he had him on here earlier in the year, he was talking about a different plant that was trending higher, and I forgot which one that was. So
another one of the ficus, I think.
Yeah. So he's overdue to come in to correct me on that. But again, we think a lot of Steve Stanford and everything that he's done with plants over the years, and he's just growing. He's growing like a weed, that company, and in all the best ways. Yep. So, and the other thing I might mention too is Kelly Stafford Tree Service. If you're having some, overgrown trees, we talked about the opening of the segment. We talked about, making sure that you're prepared for hurricanes and that sort of thing. We definitely recommend that you give Kelly Stafford a call. You can do so at 727-546-8786. That's 727-546-8786. And you can visit her on the web at staffordtreesvc.com.
SVC. Okay. Yeah, and she's a great gal, and she has a good company, and her brother helps, and they all work as a family. So we like helping family businesses, and she's tops.
Correct. And they have a lot of nice equipment, and, and they're very competitive on their rates, and they do a very, very nice job from beginning to end, and it makes it easy to recommend companies that are like-minded as we are. And we will definitely be having her on, I think, the next time that we're recording, which will be on the 31st of this month.
So we appreciate each and every one of you. When I come back, I talked earlier about an avocado. You can take the pit out, and we'll talk about how you can start one from a pit if you want to try to grow your own.
Ooh.
And so that's the hook. Stay with us as the Plant Talk and Real Estate Talk continues here on AM 860, The Answer.
Want to talk real estate? Call James DeFreitas at 727-254-7127 or go online, aflre.com. Welcome back to the Ask Mr. Greenthumb in Real Estate Show. Got questions about perennial flowers? What about issues with closing on your newest property? Give him a call at 727-254-7127. That's 727-254-7127. And now your hosts, Stan and James DeFreitas.
And we appreciate you being with us, as always, both on, I guess, YouTube and Facebook. And, of course, we're broadcast live every Saturday, or I should say Saturday evening, 8 to 9 p.m. And Sunday, we are on from 8 to 9 a.m., so we're everywhere. And we're always expanding our reach further, too.
Right. And you are Stan DeFreitas, Mr. Greenthumb, and I am James DeFreitas. And so we always like to start out the segment reminding folks who maybe weren't with us the previous segment of who we are. And again, we also, every 3 weeks we're, taping a program. Of course, you go do a live program one Sunday out of the month. So
this coming Sunday, I'll be live.
Yeah, this Sunday, which will be, what is that coming up to be? That's, another 3 or 4 days from now. So then people can listen to you live on the radio, and they can actually call you and ask for plant questions when you're live. And hopefully you make that distinction when you're on, that you actually are in fact live.
I always tell people when I am live, so they can call in directly that point. And
right. And when you are live, as we are kind of live taped recording today, depending upon how you are catching us. If you're catching us on Facebook Live, which is being aired on your Facebook page, and then of course the YouTube page where we just had a camera malfunction, literally fell as I was trying to get you in the shot. We haven't done, I've mentioned too, we've not done the YouTube Live before, but it made sense to me for us to go ahead and start getting this content up on that site, even if it isn't being perfectly edited, because most of the people I talk to have said, well, look, it doesn't have to be perfect.
Just has to be.
You just, you're not getting it up there, and if you're not getting it up there, then it doesn't do any good, that footage being stored on my hard drive, if it never makes it onto, to the YouTube space. So
makes all kind of sense.
Yeah. So
We of course, will answer your questions. You can send them to Stan, Mr. Greenthumb, or you can go to askmrgreenthumb.com, askmrgreenthumb.com if you've got a problem, or send us a picture. I like to see things. I was talking to one of our sales guys in the hallway, and he goes, let me show you a picture. And he said, see, you helped my palm, because I told him to put some palm food on it and some magnesium on it, and it looks a lot better than what he showed me before. And I said, well, you can always send me a picture via the website, or you can call. So, and I've not checked mine. I will check my site later. There is a, the man with the pine and the oak. I said, send some pictures to me, and I can then see them, and I can tell more about your pine and your oak. If your pine is more than 10% brown, you'll probably lose it no matter. If we can catch it before it goes 10% brown, I have a good shot. I mean, I know I injected my neighbor's tree who had borers, or say they had borers, I should say, Metchie and Jesse 20 years ago. And the tree is still there. Now, they lost one or two that were too far gone, but we saved some trees that I was worried, because the problem with the borers is often when they get through with the Meals on Wheels, they go off to the next tree nearby.
Right.
And as the tree starts to decline, it emits a hormone, and it's like, every borer within the mile goes, let's eat, at Jesse and Metchie's or whoever. They'll come to your place like you've got a neon sign out there.
Meals on Wheels.
And they will be there, and they will attack your tree. If your tree starts to decline, and older trees, kind of like people, as we get older, there's more problems that kind of, when you're young and you're active, it's kind of like my new kitty cat. The new kitty cat just boom, boom. It's like a pinball all over everywhere.
Tanner/Chucky.
Yeah, I'm calling him Tanner C. DeFreitas, and C for Chucky, as you came up with the name. He's a great kitty, but boy, he's just, rambunctious. Some of it's kittyhood. I don't know. He also seems to have a special gene for biting and clawing.
Yeah. We need the cat whisperer, that funny looking guy on Discovery Channel with the weird beard.
Yeah, Jackson.
Yeah.
Actually, Peg watches him sometimes, and of course, he always.
My favorite's when he gets bit.
He usually comes on with his guitar, so he can kind of use it not to play, but to put a shield between him like the police do on riots, or at least back when we used to support the police for having riot gear. I guess today that would be unseemly of them to protect themselves when they should. But I don't want to get off on that too much. But yes, I do have respect for all the police and firemen out there, and we all should, because anybody that's out there putting their life on the line for us deserves a pat on the back.
Even the new mayor in New York, and again, I'm not going to get too political either, but even the mayor in New York that took over, he came out and was saying that, the justice system that they have right now with the bail, I mean, basically there's no bail. I mean, you just let them in, let them out, let them in, let them out. It's one of these crazy ideas, and he knows that that's going to have to be changed. So the whole idea behind defund the police, well, they tried that experiment.
Didn't work well.
It didn't work very well. And now they're going to have to go back to law and order and policing and making sure that we stop people from being criminals.
Well, I was reading an article the other day too, saying, where they used to stop people a lot in New York. I mean, for stupid, anything.
Stop and frisk?
Let's say the guy threw this cup down on the thing, and they say, hey, pick it up. And while you're that, let's check you out. And they check him out. Then you'd find out the guy was a felon from somewhere and had a gun in his back pocket, and you got rid of them, and it made the city safer.
Right.
But now you're saying, well, that seems, like you're targeting. Well, no.
Well, unfortunately, it did work, and I think one of the things that we'll have to go back to is looking at things that actually did work, and again, you can put a label on something and say it's bad to do something, but if you look at the results and you say, well, it's safer, then we have to look at what's safer and not what's politically friendly to say. And so, yeah, they're going to have to look at that in a different kind of way because, unfortunately, stop and frisk did work very well. Yes, a lot of people were targeted, I guess, but, if you're not doing something bad, it won't be a problem, will it?
Shouldn't be a problem.
That's
right.
Exactly. So, yeah, that's where I come out on that as well. So, but, yeah, so at the end of the day, and as we mentioned in a previous segment, I am starting a new real estate company, and it's going to be called Dream It Real Estate. We will not be open for business until about the first week or two in September. And so, it's coming up, but it's definitely one of those things where it takes time to get all of that in order. And but we will be ready to launch it in the first week of September. So stay tuned for that. We'll have lots more information there. One of the things I might mention too is in the real estate space is it is still a great market. It is still a great time if you have a property that needs to be sold or if you're looking to buy something. Now, I will say if you're a buyer, most of the real estate companies out there, I'm not saying that you can't get a loan to buy a property. Then it's just one of these things where, you're still competing with a lot of cash buyers, and it makes it very, very difficult to have the same competitive edge if you're, coming into the situation with a loan. Because one of the first things that's going to happen, and again, for people that aren't real familiar, and all the real estate people in the world know this already, but if you've only done a deal or two and you're not really thinking it through, one of the things I would explain is, the soon as you have a loan, then you're also obligated into having to have the property inspected, and it has to meet appraisal values consistent with what's been sold in the area within the last 6 months. So, and in 6 months, this real estate market really changes. It goes from being something that's, I'm looking at the year-over-year returns, or I should say sale price from 2021 to 2022. And one of the things that I find shocking is if you look at single-family homes. Now, this is in Pinellas County, but in May of 2021, the median price was $355,000. In 2022, the median price jumped to $450,000. So that is a year-to-year change of 27%, roughly.
Amazing.
That's an amazing amount of return, on the investment for 1 year of ownership. Townhomes and condos. Well, in May of 2021, the median range was 233,000. In 2022, the median range was 285,000, which is a 22.3% year-over-year change. So, but I will say this isn't sustainable. I mean, you cannot have 23% growth year over year over year. It's just not going to happen.
The rocket can't go on forever.
Yeah, I mean, you're talking about every 5 years at that pace, you'd be doubling the price of a home. I mean,
Well, I think we're at a crossroads almost now where we see a lot of activity changing. A lot of people are reducing some of their prices, or at least talking about it.
Well, you're seeing a lot more open houses too.
Yeah, real estate agents right now aren't just taking backup offers.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Taking up backup offers on homes that are overpriced to begin with, and a lot of those are taking place up there in Port Richey. I won't name the one I'm thinking about, but needless to say, that noise means we are finished with today's show, and we surely appreciate everyone who listened to it, and stay tuned for next week.
Thanks for being with us.
Interested in having a home consult? Remember, you can reach Stan at 727-423-4794 or on the web at askmrgreenthumb.com.